Good afternoon. My name is Christina Cortez. Today is March 19th, 2021. I'm zooming in from Murphy, North Carolina with Stephen Valdivia, who is a MFOS graduate from the University of Florida. Where are you zooming in from, if you don't mind me asking?
I am in Jersey City, New Jersey, just across the pond from New York City.
Okay, that's pretty cool. So I guess we'll get right into it. And my first question for you is, if you could tell me a little bit about what it means to be a first generation college graduate.
Great first question. What does it mean to be a first-gen graduate? I mean, it means a lot. And I think it means a lot to me because it means a lot to my family. Because when I think about being a first-gen American and a first-gen college graduate, it tells me about all the sacrifices my family made to get me to this spot. And to me, it means that I have the responsibility to also bring people up with me and to help other first geners, but other people of diverse backgrounds. It means that I need to work a little bit harder in my job because I don't have that background and I don't have that background and I don't have that privilege that a lot of people that aren't first geners have. But it means a lot to me. It means, yeah. It means I feel very proud of myself. And I think a lot of college graduates are just like, great, I did this.
You should be proud of yourself. It's something really difficult to do. So, since you spoke about your parents, if you could tell me a little bit about your parents' experiences and maybe their professions and just their lives, because it's so important as part of the first gen identity, your parents. So.
Yeah, my parents are super hardworking people that I see that I'm like, what are you doing with your life? And what they're doing is they're living their life for me and my brother. My mom is from El Salvador. She actually has a degree in architecture, but she left El Salvador because of gang violence and moved to Nicaragua. And that's where she met my father in Nicaragua. My dad's from there. And then they both had to escape Nicaragua because of war and more gang violence. So they actually made their way to Mexico, walked the border, got arrested in Texas, and did that whole, that story of, immigrants crossing the border. They did it all and ended up in Miami, where I'm from. And they worked lots of jobs like waitresses, warehouses. Now my mom's a daycare teacher and my dad has his own small business shipping to Nicaragua. So he's a mover, but he moves people to Nicaragua.
And since you mentioned your mother had a degree in architecture from El Salvador, how did your family in particular view higher education in the sense, like, did they push you towards college or let you choose like your own kind of path to go down?
Yeah, so my mom, she never actually finished her degree because she had to flee right before she finished her credit. Okay. But she was 4 years in, she was about to finish and had to leave. But to answer your question, my parents, since I was born, pushed me to go to college, and it was, you need to get a scholarship. So you need to get straight A's and go to college because that's the only way you can make it in this country. You need a college degree. So it was always tough, those tough parents. You get a B and it's like, why did you get a B? And you're like, what? I worked so hard for this B. And but they both instilled that higher education is very important because it adds value when you're looking for jobs. Like, you are more valuable to a company and to a business if you have a degree, and a high school diploma doesn't get you more than like an hourly job. And they're really aiming really high for us.
So it was a very like job oriented focus, is like for reasoning or why you should get your degree.
Um, I think it was like various reasons. Of course, it's like the career. They wanted us to build a career and, you know, be successful and be, and I say we because of my brother. So they wanted my brother and I to be successful and to get careers, but also they were always like, you guys are much smarter than us. And that's what each generation does. And why would you want to stop learning right after high school when high school is just the first step? They wanted us to be more intellectual beings, I guess.
And since they viewed like higher education so important, it was obviously something that's been instilled upon you by your parents, obviously probably from your own feelings as well. How was that experience of applying to colleges and having that pressure of like trying to find a scholarship to go to college?
Um, so I had no help in trying to apply for college. Um, no, that's not true. I had a little help in trying to apply for college because um, my brother went to college. He went to the University of Miami, and he helped me a little. But he was also like in the beginning of it, he didn't know much, and it was just like send out applications and hope something lands. Um, when I was graduating my senior year in high school, I was very certain that I would join the military, um, or go to community college with a scholarship with bright futures. Um, so I was already talking to military recruiters, and I was talking to people at Miami-Dade College about, you know, what scholarships were available. And that was it. I knew I was going either into the Air Force or to Miami-Dade College, probably to study music, because I knew I did band in high school and I knew the Miami-Dade band lead. And he was like, you play this instrument, we can get you a scholarship. So that was like, I don't want anything to do with music, but I need to go to college. Um, and then I got this letter that I had no idea what it meant from UF. And I had someone look at it and they're like, Steven, sign this paper because it means you're going to college for free. And I was like, okay.
Can you tell me a little more about that experience with like how when you first got into MFOS, like did you know nothing about it at all? I mean, you said that you just read the paper, but what was that like keep going and finding out more and more about like the MFOS program?
So I had no idea what FO, do you want to call it MFOS? Because it was FOS when I was MFOS, like motherfuckers. Okay. MFOS. When I had, first of all, I had no idea what FOS was or what it stood for. I didn't know what that paper meant. All I knew is that I signed it, it meant free college, and that's it. And even I went to orientation, those 2 or 3 days where you stay at the dorms, still had no idea about anything until I actually started. And I knew that I was required to start in the summer because of the FOS program. And I had to take a special class because of the FOS program. And I'm like, what is this? But at the very beginning, there was another orientation, and then the person leading it was like, congratulations, Steven, and everybody started clapping for me. And I was like, why? And they had to explain it to me on my first day of college, like, oh, you're in the FOS program, which means you're like first in your family to go to college and you're going to college for free and that you worked really hard. And I was like, oh, I had no idea. I had zero idea what this was. And it was because the paper that came from FOS was very complicated and I didn't know. I was just like, okay. So it was very surprising. And all of a sudden, like, my view of college changed. My view of what I could accomplish changed because I didn't know that this meant that I don't need to get 6 part-time jobs to fund college or it didn't mean that I needed to chase a degree in something to like pay my student loans later. It meant that I could enjoy college more and not really focus on the financial burden. More importantly, I knew that this would totally take so much burden off my parents' shoulder because they were so worried about being able to help me pay for college. And the fact that they didn't have to give me any money was a miracle, honestly.
And since you mentioned, I know that the financial part is a really big aspect of the FOS program, and a lot of people have shared their experiences of having that burden lifted off of them. Before I get a little more into the financials, identity, when you talk about not realizing what the FOS program was until like your first day of college and somebody telling you, so how is that related to your first generation identity? And was that something you realized before you got to UF, or was it something that you more and more realized as you went later on into the FOS program, if that makes sense?
One more time.
Was the first generation identity something you realized before you came to the University of Florida?
Oh, no, I had no idea I was a first generation anything. I knew I was a first generation American because my parents instilled that into me, that you are not an immigrant, but you are a child of immigrants. And you need to work hard to get out of this community that we're in. A first generation college student wasn't something I thought about or thought was something significant, because my parents instilled to me that I need to go to college since I was a little kid. So like going to college was like, okay, yeah, I'm doing this. But I didn't realize how much of an achievement it was for my family. So the FOS program really helped me, what's the word? I'm sorry, I'm bad with words. The FOS program really, UF and the FOS program really just helped me understand what it means for families and how there's so many other families just like this, and how it made me learn about what generational wealth is. It helped me think about how each generation needs to help the next generation, because a program like this gets a family out of a cycle of whatever is happening. So for a lot of people, it gets families out of a cycle of poverty. It gets families out of a cycle of jobs or health-related concerns, because you go to college, you learn stuff, you're educated, and you know how to go back and help your parents be like, hey, the stuff you told me about doing your taxes is incorrect. You're actually committing a lot of fraud. No, I'm kidding. Like, this stuff you're telling me about finance doesn't make sense. You should be doing this instead. Or, hey, this stuff that you think about how to fix your health, it's actually detrimental to your health. And it's going back and teaching your parents something that that goes through generations and it's actually not true. Tackling falsehoods is one thing that the FOS program really helps in.
And since you talk so much about, which is really interesting, the cycle of, or getting out of that cycle of poverty, and how that helps you to just flourish in a way, as a beneficiary of MFOS, how do you pay it forward to others? Because you mentioned that generational, or helping other generations, is super important. What do you do to help the next generation of FOS students?
Of FOS students? Whenever there's someone from an FOS program reaching out to me, I always respond and I always give time, no matter what. There are a lot of UF people that reach out, and I'm like always iffy. I'm just like, okay, there's so many UF. The Gator Nation is really everywhere, and I'll give everyone my time of day. But for an FOS person, it means so much more for them, because it means so much more for them because this experience that they have and this opportunity and this network is actually smaller than what the rest of the US students have. So it is a responsibility of mine to talk to first gens, to give them advice and to tell them, to give people advice, to tell them how life is so different for first gens after you graduate from college. One thing I do with MFOS is that I give money to MFOS. And since I graduated, because even I wasn't making money after I graduated, but I knew it was important and I knew they depended on this money. I don't give back to Columbia where I got my graduate degree. And when UF reaches out to me, I'm like, if I give you money, it needs to go to this program because they need it, because they need to get more people into this program or give everyone more money.
In what way is life different after you graduate from the FOS program? Because you mentioned that. How is life different, or how is it different for you?
When you are a first generation graduate, and I think it's across all of us, you are fighting for jobs against people who have parents that have gotten you internships since you were little in very big companies. And well, you know, you're fighting against people who you're fighting against people who have parents that have the means to get you into whatever school you wanted to begin with, or to whatever internship you have. They have the friends and the connections that are like, hey, I know the executive of JP Morgan, or I know the executive of CNN, so we can get you in there. And a lot of people, even when in college, they have experience in these professional places before you even had time to think about something like that. So you are fighting, not only are you fighting against these people, but a lot of these graduates are coming from like larger schools, more prestigious schools. And I love UF, but UF isn't an Ivy League. So not only are you a first gen, but you're fighting for jobs with people that are graduating from Harvard and are graduating from here and didn't have to, you know, we have the MFOS program to really relieve this burden of financials, but there's still a family and emotional burden that comes with that, because we still have our parents to worry about. And we really try and focus on our education and whatever, but other graduates didn't have this, right? Most don't, you know, I don't know, but it's a different way of thinking throughout your college career, and it's a different way of graduating. So what else does that mean? It means when you finish, yeah, you don't have debt, but that doesn't mean you still have the means to go somewhere. So you might graduate college, and some people, I live in New York now, so I know so many people that graduated college and moved to New York City and had mom and dad paying rent, and they're just looking around for an unpaid internship still. Meanwhile, I'm graduating college and I'm doing job interview after job interview, being okay with a really low paying job, or my first job was a minimum wage job working at a TV station, which a graduate from another school with a family with means wouldn't care that that's the case, or wouldn't even consider taking it because they'd rather be unemployed. I think that's how it's different.
Thank you for sharing that. I'm sure it's a difficult experience.
And I'm sorry, it goes beyond, because this is my thing. I love talking about, because even you keep going in your career and it keeps coming up. It keeps coming up that you don't have experience that other people don't. And in the job interview, you have to, and this is what I try and tell every other MFOS alum, it is your job during that interview to prove that you are better than everyone else. And that's if you're lucky that you landed that interview. So it is having that personality and having that story to really tell people. And it's not kind of milking that you're not privileged. It's milking that you can work hard and make it through. And that's what FOS means.
Since you're mentioning so much this tension between first generation students that have to graduate without as much experience as maybe other students have had. Did you have any negative experiences maybe while you were at UF or right now in your postgraduate career where you clashed because somebody else was not first generation?
At UF or after? Both.
Whichever.
Um, I have one very vivid memory of my first job after college. And all of a sudden, I'm in a meeting and I look at my phone and I say something like, "Oh shit, I just overdrafted." And then the person next to me, who's a supervisor, she goes to me and she's like, "Oh, what happened?" And I'm like, "Oh, my student loan. I have auto pay for my student loan. I took all my money." And she said to me, "Well, why aren't your parents paying that?" And I was just like, I had no response. I was just shocked. I was just shocked that that's a question. And no, I mean, that's what you're fighting against is people don't know, even in your professional career, that being a first gen anything means that you have more work to do behind the scenes. It doesn't mean that you have your nice salary and then you get to use it how you want. It means you are splitting this money. I give money to my parents every month because they make minimum wage, 30 years of experience in the United States. That's ridiculous. So that's one, and that's the one that pisses me off up to this day. It's been like 10 years since that happened. Speaking of overdrafting, I remember once in college, I overdrafted. I guess I shouldn't have because FOS, but once in college, I overdrafted, and my friend asked me, "What does overdraft mean?" And I was like, "Oh, what a life, not knowing what that means." So it's not tensions, it's just different lives, and yeah, different lives. I never blame anyone for having privilege. I hope my kids are privileged. I am privileged now after all this time, and it is just how you use it. So no, the friend that said, "Hey, what does overdraft mean?" I'm not like, "You rich little spoiled brat." It's more like it was just like a jab, and like, man, I wonder what that's like, you know?
When we talk about privilege, it's interesting because there have been some MFOS students, or at least the ones that I've interviewed, that feel like, or FOS in this case, because that's what it was called when you were going to University of Florida, that had family members, like let's say your brother, since he went to college also, that didn't get the scholarship and felt different. In that kind of way, if you got the scholarship versus other first gen students, did you feel more privileged than them, or did you just kind of feel like that was the situation that was given to you?
If I think about me getting an FOS scholarship that fully pays my higher education and people that don't, now, yes, I would be a privilege. But I knew from the very beginning I was lucky, especially since everyone said that to me, like, "Steven, you're so lucky." And I was like, I had no idea this was a thing. I didn't apply for it. It just came to me. Like what karma did I have that this came to me? But you know, we talked about what it means to give back as a first gen now into my career. And it's not just FOS. I give back to any first gen. And when I hire, I look for this. I look for people who are from first generation programs or first generation American or first generation college graduates, because I know that struggle. So for you to go through college and have that debt, it's for you to go to college, have that debt, and then go through the same thing that I did of having to work a minimum wage job and overdraft because my student loans just have to auto pay because that's what life is. That's not fair. So no. Yeah. What was the question?
No, it was just about it was just whether you saw FOS as a privilege in comparison to others, but you said looking back now.
It's hard, yeah, because I am privileged that I don't have debt. I am privileged now that I don't have undergraduate debt. I decided to go to grad school and get into debt. But that's my privilege. That was my privilege when I graduated college, that I, one, graduated, have a degree, and two, didn't have loans to pay. That changes everything in how you approach chasing your career. I was able to choose to chase a career in what I wanted to do instead of looking for any job to pay my bills. That's a privilege. Getting into FOS was luck for me. Finishing up the program was a privilege.
I'm also interested in some of the other programs that you support outside of MFOS. If you can talk a little bit about those, or maybe some experiences you've had hiring first-gen people or first-gen graduates, that would be interesting to hear.
Yeah, I mean, the way I help others is really all over the place. When I hire, I look for other schools have first-gen programs. I don't know what they're called, but I know in San Francisco, there's some in the University of Michigan. And I get the people, the organizers, whatever they're called, the organizers of these programs reach out to me, and I'm on job boards that like, hey, look at this program, look at what we do, look at how we help people. And I'm always like, fuck yeah. But I also look into, I look at people who went to community college. I look at people who went to community college. I look for people who went to HBCUs. I look for people who have online degrees. These paths to getting higher education, that's not the Ivies. That's not the big private schools. But I do, like, I look at them, but my first thought when I look at a resume and I see that education, I mean, like, this is a hard worker. That doesn't mean, like, I have plenty of first gen people that got into these Ivies, or like my brother, he went to a private school. That doesn't mean that they're any less worthy or more privileged than anybody. It just means that they have this piece of paper that has a little bit more weight when you're going to apply to places.
And you mentioned a lot also how you get back to MFOS and FOS again, but has Dr. Pendleton and anybody from the FOS program recommended you somebody from the University of Florida who was a graduate from FOS, and you've interacted with them, or has there been any experience in that way where you have an alumni that needs help and you're there if somebody asks you?
I don't know. I don't think so.
Okay.
Should tell me you.
But that was just interesting. I think
there have been because Dr. Pendleton does do a lot of this work and does work in like highlighting alums and also like sending people like their way. There have been people that reached out to me, especially were like, hey, I want to move to New York City. How do I do that? Or, hey, I want to work in journalism. How do I do that? And I just give them advice, which is generally run.
So actually, let's talk about a little bit about your degrees, because I did see on the paper that Dr. Pendleton provided us that you graduated with degrees in journalism and telecommunication, right?
Yeah.
Okay. having followed through with these majors, did you ever feel pressured to pursue a business or a STEM degree or face backlash from like having these two disciplines from anyone?
Did I face backlash from working in these disciplines?
Yeah. From your family or from friends or
Since the day I started, my parents were like, why would you ever major in film? Because I graduated with telecommunications. Nobody in the world knows what that means in English or in Spanish. So I just told my parents, I'm studying filmmaking. And they're like, you're not gonna get anywhere with that. You're gonna be a starving artist. What are you gonna do with that? And it was just over and over and over that same question. Or you should be studying engineering like your brother, or you should be getting ready for a law degree, or getting ready in science and getting ready in this. And I was always like, I'm not good at any of that. So just get that out of your mind. It was all of my family. All of my family said, why are you wasting a free degree on a useless degree? Sorry, can you hear my Slack?
a little bit, but it's okay. Keep going.
Start. Sorry, I should actually read this. Okay. All of my family was telling me, why am I wasting a free degree on a degree that might not get me anywhere, on something that's as useless as film? Why am I chasing dreams to go to Hollywood and be a Hollywood filmmaker when you know that I didn't know it yet, but you know at the end, you still need to help your family financially. So yeah, I got lots of backlash. It stopped when because I started in telecommunications, I was doing production, which is kind of the film aspect. And then I pivoted to the news program, which was more of the journalism and TV news part. And once I started doing that, I started getting internships. And I started working at WUFT, doing live TV for PBS. So I'm telling my parents and I'm telling my family, hey, look, I'm doing work for PBS. Hey, look, I just got an internship at NBC. And that's when they realized, hey, look, there is a career here. And things changed. But things haven't changed because then years later, I graduated with a master's from Columbia in journalism. My graduation day, I'm giving my parents a tour of Columbia's campus. We passed to law school and my dad's like, that's where you should have graduated from. It's like, damn it. So I don't know. I think immigrant parents, maybe parents in general, will always want you to be a lawyer, a doctor, or an engineer. And I think we, as first-gen Americans in general, are smarter to know that you can create a career in whatever you want.
And you have all these experiences. You mentioned WFT, PBS, and graduating from Columbia, which is impressive. Tell me a little bit more about your journey after graduating from UF, where you've lived, or I saw that you're working at LinkedIn. If you can just share maybe some experiences from after you graduated University of Florida.
So I graduated UF, and because of my experience with WUFT, which is a great program where you get real life experience producing news in a real channel where people watch it, I was lucky enough to graduate from this program and get job interviews from other TV stations around Florida, mostly like Northern Florida. But I didn't take any because I was privileged enough at that point to choose what job I wanted. And I knew that I didn't want to move to Florida City and make minimum wage when I don't like Florida City and I don't want to make minimum wage living I don't know where. And I was lucky enough to have my parents who have a home and have my childhood bedroom welcoming me back home. So I went back home and I was pretty much unemployed for like 6 months. I finally got a job as a waiter. As I was like, I got a job as a waiter because I knew like 6 months was already enough time and I needed to just make money. And eventually I got a job at Channel 7 News, the Fox affiliate in Miami, working overnight as a writer. So my job, I would start at about 3 or 4 a.m. and finish at around 7 a.m. So it was a part-time writing gig making like $8 an hour. I was so happy. But those $8 an hour part-time wasn't enough. Yeah, that $8 an hour wasn't enough. So I kept that waiter job. So I was really working like around the clock, which goes against what I said of having that privilege. But this again means like, it just shows that there are people that were hired at the same place who had this less experience than I did, but they had a dad with like leverage that they could use. And there are specific people I remember. So I did that. And then I worked there for about a year. Someone from UF was working there with me, and she was a graduate from Columbia Journalism. And she's like, hey, you should apply to this program. And I said, no, I'm not that smart. It's not like, why am I going to waste $100 on an application? It just doesn't make sense. And she's like, do it. I promise you that you'll get in. So I applied and I got in. And I never wanted to go to grad school. Actually, in those 6 months when I was unemployed, I decided, okay, let me go back to college. I want to go back to UF and get my master's in communications. I was actually turned down from UF graduate school. And that's why I was like, all right, well, it wasn't meant to be. And that program's not going to be paid for. Whatever I get into, I am going to get into debt. But then I got into Columbia, and it was a 1-year graduate program. And it didn't make sense for me not to go. Because like that piece of paper, it weighs. And more than that, my career in media, in my career in news and journalism, the capital of media is New York City. So I had no way to go to New York City without an excuse like school or an actual job. Unlike people that come here and look for a job, that's just not possible for me. So the other thing that made Columbia possible for me was that I have an aunt that lives in New Jersey, and I moved into her basement and paid her $500 a month. And I commuted an hour and a half to school every day. And I would crash at the couches or the chairs of our campus because at a certain time, buses from New York to New Jersey stopped. So there was no way for me to get home. This was pre-Uber, but an Uber from Manhattan to New Jersey is like $100. So that's not even worth it. Anyway, I graduated from Columbia, and I want to say, I graduated from Columbia, and Fortune magazine was looking for a video producer, and I saw it on our job board. And not only did I apply, but one thing I always say is that you need to reach out directly because applications just fall into this void. I reached out. The person loved me. Luckily, she was of Hispanic descent, and she was like, yes, let's get more people on board. I was one of Fortune's very first hires in the video team. It was a brand new video team. And from there, I started as an intern. It was an internship and kept going. Oh, I missed something. Before I got into Columbia, so before I got into Columbia, I was actually offered an internship at Inside Edition. And that was my very first experience in New York City. And it was a paid internship. And because I was a graduate intern, I was given these stories that were just insanely difficult, and it really helped like build like who I am as a journalist. Because you think of Inside Edition, you're like, this guy got plastic surgery to look like Justin Bieber, which is a real story I worked on. But we also looked into like dirty cops, and we looked into dirty charities, and looking into data and looking into that. So that was good for internships. Okay, so I worked at Fortune. I finished Fortune 3.5 years later. It was just time for me to leave. I was bored. And then I was privileged enough to be able to quit, but I was still very scared because I needed money. But I quit. I am fortunate enough to have parents with a house. So I moved back home for a couple of months, and then I got a job offer at the Associated Press. I would have never quit my job if I would have thought I wouldn't have gotten a job in 6 months or less. I knew that it was still the very beginning of like digital video. Video producers are always in demand. And I knew like I had the skill set that not a lot of people have, so I'm gonna get a job. Like I was confident. And I worked at Fortune magazine, and that's just a company that's gonna land you wherever. I just wanted to, chill and go back home because New York is cold. So I got a job at the Associated Press. I got a job at the Associated Press. It was at Washington, D.C., so I needed to move to Washington, D.C. I worked there for only 6 months because it wasn't the right fit. I was hired for a job that actually didn't exist anymore. I was given a position to help produce video for a channel that we're going to start, but they actually ended up not starting it. So they gave me a different job, and that job I didn't want. It didn't utilize any of my skills. So I was talking to my boss, and she's like, "You're right, Steven. You're great, and we want you here, but I understand that you're not learning anything here. And I think in every job you should be learning and growing." And then I stayed in the job, but I kept applying the jobs. And then I got a job at Mike, which ended up being one of my dream jobs. And at Mike, if you don't know Mike is a startup. Well, not anymore. Mike was a media startup that did social justice journalism. And they just started a new thing where they're making social justice documentaries. It was a kind of Vice documentary meets CBS 60 Minutes, where we're interviewing big names or in small names, but it's just change makers that just like blow your mind. And in that time, I was able to work on a story that was exclusive to Mike, which you might remember was when Kim Kardashian was working with Donald Trump to get this grandmother out of prison. So I was one of two people in Mike with Kim every day for weeks, just like following her and looking at her experience. And honestly, what we were doing is just waiting for a phone call from the president to say, "Hey, I signed this paper and she's free." And I'm not plugging Donald Trump at all. But it was everything I wanted to do because it was giving back using my career, and that's what I wanted to do. And then after Mike, so I was there, we're doing great, I'm traveling the world, I'm telling stories, I'm going to farms, I'm going to West Virginia, I'm going to San Francisco to meet John Legend, I'm going here to talk to opioid addicts, I'm going there to talk to like climate change advocates. and talking to Native Americans, and all of a sudden my crashes, burns, and I'm laid off with like 4 hours notice. All 100 people at Mike were laid off and were told to leave the building by 1 p.m. It was 11 a.m. So that was like a huge shock. And then I was unemployed again. Just lots of unemployment in my life. I stayed in New York because my brother was living with my parents at that moment. So I couldn't go back to my parents as usual. And I had a lease, so I can't break a lease. So I still had to pay rent. So I just stayed here. I was unemployed for a long time, and then I really leaned on my network to get freelance jobs. So I was working here and there, getting little gigs. And then I used LinkedIn and I said, hey, everyone, I got laid off my job. I'm looking for a new opportunity. I reached out to my network. Just like in any social, if people aren't like liking it, it won't show up. So I just texted everyone I knew. I'm like, can you like this post, please? Eventually it went up the feed and I got like so many job offers, like really random things. I got a job offer to be an anchor for a soccer channel in Spanish. I'm like, first of all, I hate sports. I hate soccer. And I speak Spanish, but not enough to talk about a sport I don't know. But they were like, do it anyway. Anyway, I didn't do it. And someone that I worked with at Fortune, who's working at LinkedIn, reached out, said, hey, we're hiring for a video person. And I got the job. Here I am 2 years later.
You have so many interesting experiences. It's really nice to hear about like how you've progressed. And I kind of find myself drawn to your experience at Columbia because you graduated from the University of Florida, being first generation. What was being first gen like at Columbia versus someplace like UF?
Being first generation at Columbia was really hard. And I wasn't the only one. There's other people. But no, I'm lying. It was just my personal experience was different because my parents don't speak English and their experience in having a career is very different. So they didn't have well-paying jobs. We don't have like the nicest house. And they don't have the money to support me. So when I went to Columbia, I knew it was all on me. Just like in undergrad and just like the experiences I had afterwards, everyone had mom and dad paying for them. Everyone had mom and dad paying for them. And for a long time, I didn't know because I met other first gen people but their parents had a lot more means. And it's just like good for them. They worked up. They had to work a little harder because my parents live in Hialeah, Florida, where you don't need to learn English. And a lot of these people move to these cities where you do need to learn English and get a job like that. So I'm talking to people and I'm like, no, okay, here's what happened. I was in Colombia and my friends, my colleagues were going out every night. And we were going to like rooftop bars. We were going to lounges, and cocktails here are like $20 a cocktail. And I was just like, okay, I guess this is New York City life. I didn't do it for the first, like during my internship time. So I was just like, all right, I'm putting it on a credit card, until I actually started talking to my friends like more intimately about like, hey, aren't you worried about paying this? And that's where I realized they're like, no, my mom gives me a budget. Oh no, it's fine. And then actually Columbia didn't have a scholarship program like FOS. Their scholarship programs are merit-based. So only people with 4.0 GPAs were getting scholarships. So I received $4,000 in scholarships, and the program cost about $80,000 without room and board. So that's a lot of money. So it was different in that terms where like I'm trying to be social with my friends, but their social life is way different than my social life. Like at UF, we had penny wine and dime beers, and these people were NYU grads who were paying $20 cocktails since they started. Yeah.
And talking about finances and just all of the differences in between people that had that kind of freedom or that financial freedom to pay for what they wanted. How was MFOS providing programs to inform, or let me rephrase this. What programs did MFOS offer you, MFOS offer you to give like that financial knowledge and how to deal with money?
Sorry, my dog and my boyfriend are having a thing.
No, it's okay. I didn't see that you were muted, so.
What programs did FOS provide to teach me about this stuff, right?
Exactly.
FOS, and I need to leave in 15 minutes, by the way. FOS had a bunch of programs, and I think the one that really helped wasn't finance, it was resume building. They just kept drilling this on us. Build your resume, your resume. And I had no idea how important it was and how to have a really good resume. That's one thing, an FOS program that was the best. There was a lot of financial programs about financial literacy, which is very important because we're not taught that in high school or from our parents. It's about how to have a bank account, what a savings account means, how to budget, which was very important because it was the first time most of us had a big chunk of money in our bank account. When we got that financial aid, it was like, I'm rich, but you didn't realize that you need to make that money last an entire semester. So that helped.
Since we're running short on time, like you mentioned, you have to go pretty soon. I think I'll just ask maybe like 2 more questions. So let's do, are there influential people from your time at UF that you still stay in touch with? So faculty members, administrators, or friends from the University of Florida?
Anybody at UF or like faculty and people?
Let's just say faculty and administrators.
No. Oh, wait, yes. My professors and editors at WFT. My professors and editors at WFT have been so vital in helping me progress in my career because they had contacts, they helped us network, and because they knew I was FOS, they took even a more special interest in me than others because they knew that I'm not in the same place as other people. So to this day, I still talk to 2 of my professors. They're not at UF anymore. And they still give me advice. They still send me students that they want me to talk to. And they still bring me on to their classes to give talks. So yeah.
And the last question is kind of a bigger question. If you could describe the first generation experience in 1 word, what would it be?
I'm going to say it in a full sentence.
Whichever you want, if you want to explain your decision why also.
If I were to describe the first generation experience in 1 word, it would be perseverance. Why? Because I feel like that's what we do. That's what we do. We work and we keep working and we hustle. I would say hustle, but perseverance is a better word. Just staying hopeful, staying true to yourself, and hustling until you get that to where you want to be.
Okay. I don't know if we have time for another question or.
One more.
One more. Okay. Let me see if I found anything for you. You mentioned a lot about your experience with your parents and speaking Spanish and having that connection to the Hispanic person that helped you get a job in one of your parts of your career. How do you see your first generation identity as related to your race, nationality, ethnicity, or gender, whichever you choose to talk about it with? Because I know you've mentioned a lot of the experience of being Hispanic, so maybe that would be interesting.
One more time. What?
No, it's okay. I'm sorry. I should be clear. How do you see your first generation identity as related to something like being Hispanic?
Ah, I see. I mean, that's what first generation means, is like you first generation means, yes, you are American, but you instill all or most of your family's culture. And then as a first gen, you think about what the next generations look like in your family, in terms of what your heritage is. And not only am I a first generation American, Hispanic descent with brown skin, but I'm part of the LGBT community. And it's just layers that you need to understand, that layers that in America, in the United States, sometimes hold you back. So you need to fight, and you need to persevere, and you need to hustle. So I don't know if that was your question.
No, it's okay. That sounds pretty good. It seems like it's just they all kind of have the same perseverance in each of those different sections that you need to have, like, to overcome different struggles. That's why I asked that question.
Yeah, and you know, when I speak about my first generation experience, I try and stay away from the word struggle, because a lot of people struggle. An obstacle being like, I grew up in a school where most of the teachers were like bilingual and spoke Spanish, so my vocabulary is a lot less than a lot of other people. Side topic, but yes, I stay away from the word struggle because, yes, my parents and my family was under the poverty line, but we had it pretty good. My parents worked really hard. And again, I was lucky. I was lucky to be able to go to high school. I was lucky to be able to have new clothes on the first day of school. I was lucky to make it through college and not have any incidents. So just you said the word struggle, and I don't use that word, because I had obstacles and challenges. And when I tell other people that I struggled, it means something different to like people who aren't first gen, people who are privileged. And it's just like, hey, you need to understand what privilege means. And privilege isn't that you weren't in poverty. Privilege isn't that you had your parents. Privilege is that there are no obstacles in your way to where you want to go. Unneeded obstacles.
So thank you for sharing. Since you have to go, I say that's all for today, and I'll stop the recording if you're okay with that.
Absolutely.
And then I'll just hit stop right now.